Hey everyone, Brian here, and I am back again with a much shorter hiatus this time, coming to you with another episode of Nerd Theater. Now, last time I was all the way up in Canada talking about my last movie, Blackberry. However, this time I'm going to bring it back down to the United States of America, much closer to my neck of the woods, honestly, with another movie called Hundreds of Beavers. A much smaller movie, I might add. So this movie was directed by Mike Cheslick, who also did another movie a couple years back, I believe in 2018, that I just saw last year called Lake Michigan Monster, which I thought was really fun. Both of these movies were actually shot in Wisconsin, so as a member of the Midwest myself, I found that to be pretty cool. Now, Mike Cheslick did not direct Lake Michigan Monster. I believe it was Rylan Brixton Cole Tews who did that one. However, they're both back together again, same creative team. They both wrote Hundreds of Beavers together, and Ryland actually stars in this movie as the lead fur trapper, which I'll get into a little bit later. Hundreds of Beavers was all shot in the North Woods of Wisconsin during the pandemic, with just a shoestring budget of $150,000. The movie is reminiscent of 1920s and 30s silent film comedies from the likes of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. However, Mike Cheslick himself has stated that the film also took heavy inspiration from a comedy subgenre that he dubs Snowstick, with Donald Snowfight and Abbott and Costello Hit the Ice used as examples. The film had a virtual premiere at Fantastic Fest back in 2022, and the filmmakers self-released the movie in theaters, and its success has been a snowball effect ever since. The movie picked up steam through its festival runs and by going viral on the internet. So this movie has an absolutely bonkers premise, and it fully realizes that premise. It absolutely delivers on everything that you would want from a movie like this, and so naturally it has caught the attention of audiences everywhere. And I think a big reason for this movie's success is because it is such a visual movie. It's a slapstick. I was watching this interview recently with Jason Alexander from Seinfeld, and he was talking about why he thinks Kramer was such a huge part of Seinfeld's success. And he said that it was because Kramer's such a visual character. He's this buffoon that gets into these slapstick comical situations. All of his mannerisms are very punctuated and specific to him. And he said that brought in so many audience members that they wouldn't have had otherwise, because he said clown is like a universal language. It's something that everyone can understand, everyone can enjoy, and because of that, it pulled a lot of people in to watch Seinfeld. And I think the case is very similar here with Hundreds of Beavers. The movie starts with Jean Kayak, the owner of Acme Applejack. He's a hard cider salesman who makes the grave error of getting high on his own supply. He is drunkenly distracted and loses everything when beavers chomp away at the legs of his wooden cider tanks, destroying them. Jean must now survive in the woods and hunt for food. What makes Jean's survival so fun is that it's all slapstick. And the difference between Jean's survival in the wilderness and your typical wilderness survival is that all of the animals that he's hunting and having to defend himself against are all people in costumes. They're all guys in mascot costumes, and I think this is such a funny and smart choice by this movie because they don't operate like normal animals. They're just people in these dopey costumes, and because of that, whenever John goes head-to-head with one of these animals, it ends up just being this funny, like, awkward scuffle, and it usually ends with one of the characters, like, being ragdolled in some way. It reminds me a lot of, as I said before, 20s and 30s silent comedies. However, if you're a fan of the Jackass movies or Bad Grandpa and the shenanigans that those films bring, you're probably going to have a really good time with Hundreds of Beavers. And I think a big part of that fun is because of the mascot costumes. It's such a funny visual element, and it makes these scenes, already goofy scenarios and scenes, that much better and that much more silly. It reminds me a lot of, because this movie could easily fall apart if the animals in the movie looked in any way realistic or were real animals, because it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fun to watch a guy just torture and hunt these animals. It would just kind of be like regular hunting, and especially worse if they did the slapstick stuff. But they make the smart choice to make these animals very human, very obviously human-like. It reminds me a lot of the early Tom and Jerry cartoons. If you watch like the very, very original early Tom and Jerry run, they had Tom look and sound like an actual cat. So while the slapstick is very similar to what would be expected from that show later on, it just sounds like an actual cat being attacked and tortured, which isn't fun for anyone. So they made the really wise decision later on in Tom and Jerry to change Tom's voice to sound a lot more like a goofy grown man. And they just made him look a lot more like a cartoon cat rather than a real cat, and I definitely think that saved the show, and it saves this movie from being sadistic. It never dips into mean-spirited. It always stays consistently goofy and consistently entertaining. Despite being shot on digital, the work done in post-production makes the film look straight out of the time period that it's emulating. It has a very classic filmic look. There's grain everywhere, it's nice black and white footage, and the way that it's shot just makes the location of the Northwoods look absolutely beautiful. The movie perfectly captures the timing, impact, and physics of slapstick comedy. Because the movie sets up a specific set of rules and sticks to them, it gets away with adhering to cartoon logic. So the movie's not only very easy to follow, it's consistently funny. So the movie isn't exactly a one-to-one for silent films, as there are sound effects, there's a designated music score to the movie, and characters make small grunting noises, or maybe a one or two word sentence. So it's not a complete silent film, it's more of an homage. However, because there's no real dialogue save for an intertitle here or there, the movie completely tells its story through its visuals. Now, John's mission changes when he meets a local shopkeeper, and it's here where he realizes that he can trade the animals that he's killed for gold, and he can use that gold to buy items or weapons for his survival. And it's also here where he realizes that the shopkeeper has a daughter, and the two of them slowly start to bond and they fall in love. And the shopkeeper says to Jean that he can only have his daughter's hand in marriage if he catches hundreds of beavers. Now, the movie's score is just as chipper as everything else in the film. It fits in perfectly. We're welcomed into the movie with this jolly, big chanting song, and it's kind of Jean's theme, and they're singing about Jean and his Applejack stand and what happens to him, and it accompanies the intro of the movie perfectly. It gives you a little background about Jean and who he is, but they also use the chorus of the theme for Jean as a little motif that comes back throughout the movie. And I thought that was a really nice touch that accents his character throughout the film, because he does have a change. It's kind of a sort of zero to hero arc that Jean goes through, and it's really fun to watch, and it's punctuated by that little motif. The music then transitions from a kind of grandiose, epic, classic film score, which I thought was fitting, especially because they're trying to emulate classic Hollywood cinema. But it also ranges from that to something like whenever Jean goes to the shopkeeper, you hear a little more punchy sitar-type music that sounds similar to something you'd hear in Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time whenever you're in the shopkeeper's store, or I guess Majora's Mask as well. It has a very similar sound to that. In fact, the movie actually does have quite a few similarities to that of a video game. Everything in the story is very objective-based, and man, if this movie is a video game, it's a really fun one. The humor in Hundreds of Beavers is often juvenile in the best way possible. The laughs are never cheap and are really clever, but one thing that this movie is, above all else, is silly. I'm hard-pressed to find a single joke in this movie that doesn't work. I was laughing so consistently throughout the course of this movie, an hour and 48 minutes. I was laughing so hard that by the end of it, my sides hurt. There's one joke in particular that involves a couple baby rabbits. I won't dare spoil it here, but I think it's the best joke in the movie, and it had me laughing so hard. I was so hysterical that I had to pause the movie because it is one of the funniest comedy cuts that I think I've ever seen. On his hunt to kill hundreds of beavers, Jean slowly learns that there's something sinister going on that the beavers are planning, and he has to find out more, stopping them for good. The movie's story is so simple. I mean, it sets up everything from the beginning. You got an Applejack salesman who loses everything, and after he's stripped away of all that he knew, he is forced to survive in the wilderness, has to hunt down and catch hundreds of beavers, and that's it. That's all you have. And so with a story so simple, it's got a plot that wouldn't be out of place in like a 5-minute cartoon short. And because it's an hour and 48 minutes long, it's a feature-length film, that small premise could easily have gotten really dry and run out of creativity really early on and just become one note. However, this movie is busting at the seams with creativity. Every new scene offers something new and inventive. It keeps reinventing itself to the point that it becomes so creative, so goofy, and so absurd. I believe there was something like 1,500 VFX shots in this movie. And it's crazy. I mean, the creativity is just on screen before your eyes every second of its runtime. You could tell just so much love and creativity was put into this movie. Like I said, it follows cartoon logic perfectly. It's just an absolute joy to watch. I had such a fun time with this movie. I'm so glad that movies like this exist. I'm so glad that I got to see hundreds of beavers. I hope that it continues to do well. I hope it continues to reach people, reach different audiences. It's cool that they've kind of really, the team behind this movie pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and just really champion this movie. I mean, sure, word of mouth helps, but the fact that they're out there just pushing this movie into theaters themselves, they have no real distributor. They're kind of just a one group band, which is just so cool to me. I love that this movie's doing well. I think it's already made its money back and then a couple 100,000 more. I hope that continues. I hope we get a Blu-ray release of this film because it's definitely one that I would love to watch on repeat. It is such a fun time. If you're a fan of stuff like Three Stooges, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry. I mentioned Tom and Jerry before. I grew up with that show. I loved watching the Looney Tunes. Three Stooges is great. If you're a fan of any form of slapstick comedy or you're just looking for a good fun movie to watch, I cannot recommend Hundreds of Beavers enough. It is so funny. I had such a good time with it. Rewatching it for this video in particular was just as good as it was the first time. I love this movie. You know, you're supporting small indie filmmakers and you're having a good time while doing it. I couldn't recommend this movie more. I think it might be one of my favorite movies in the past few years because there's nothing else like it. It is just so thoroughly entertaining. My favorite movie of all time, I've mentioned on this channel before, is Evil Dead 2. And I like Hundreds of Beavers for very similar reasons. It's just a fun thrill ride. It just does what a movie is supposed to do at its core level, and it's to entertain. And I think Hundreds of Beavers does that like no other. I love this movie, and I hope you guys check it out and love it too. That's all I have to say. I don't want to spoil the movie itself. It'd be very hard to try and formulate what happens in any given scene. It's really just one you have to check out for yourself and find out. But as far as I'm concerned, I think Hundreds of Beavers is great. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, stay tuned, you guys.